Have you ever encountered a beautiful woman in her mid-20s or maybe like early 30s, and you're excited to speak to her because you're hoping that that outside beauty is going to be matched by an inside beauty? Except when you finally speak to her, you painfully discover that she has the emotional maturity of a teenager. What if I told you that that's actually not a coincidence, and that for a lot of pretty women, that's actually the age that they stop growing emotionally? For a lot of beautiful women, they actually haven't developed their personality much past the age of about 15. And that's not some strange occurrence. That's actually entirely predictable. And I'm going to explain why. Every human being has a psychological need for self-esteem. We need to feel good about ourselves. Now, for us men, that's what pushes us to achieve. That's what motivates us. If we set a personal best at the gym, we feel good about ourselves. If we get a promotion at work, we get that self-esteem boost. We read a book, we tidy the house, we ask a girl out. It doesn't really matter, but there's got to be some basis for our self-esteem. If we want to feel good about ourselves, we want to feel like we're a success, like we're worthy, deserving individuals, then we need to have something to point to. Women are exactly the same. If they want self-esteem, they want to feel good about themselves, they have to have something to point to. Now, while we have that in common, the rules for men and women are very, very different. In our early years, particularly when we are teenagers, we are highly attuned to how other people perceive us. We're very cognizant of where we stand in a group and whether or not we have status and social approval. We crave social validation. And as a boy, you take notice that when you perform well in a school test or you make the sports team, people around you celebrate you, they applaud you, they give you that social validation. Your mind registers this like, after I made that achievement, people were totally stoked on me, and that feels really, really good. I need to do more of that. Now, women are the same in this regard. When they achieve something, they get praised. They take notice of it, and they want to do more of that same thing. But there is a unique type of social validation that women have access to that boys just don't, and that is validation for their appearance. Admittedly, there is a tiny percentage of boys who are just so stunningly good looking that all the girls their age are just tripping over themselves to get their attention. But even that is quite different from what women experience, because for those really good looking boys, that attraction and that attention never really extends to adult females. That is not the case for pretty teenage girls. Yes, the boys their age are giving them lots of attention, but so are adult men. Now, please do not misunderstand me. In me pointing this out, I am in no way condoning this. Adult men should not be creeping on teenage girls, giving them attention, giving them praise about their appearance. That is completely inappropriate. But my moral outrage aside, this phenomenon is very, very real. And if you don't believe me, I challenge you to go and ask the women in your life, ask them at what age did they realize that their appearance, their sexuality have power over adult men? You might be thinking that they're going to answer 16, 17, maybe even 15, and we might hope that that was the limit of it. Again, I am not condoning this at all, but if you ask women in your life, particularly pretty women, you're going to hear answers that are a lot younger. I know that this is really uncomfortable to speak about. It's really, really gross, but it's also important because you see, for a young girl, that kind of attention is really, really hard to ignore. Like they're just a kid, they're just a young teenage girl, and it's like, wow, even adult men are paying attention to me? Like, this is powerful. I'm a teenage girl. I am unsure of my place in the world. I'm craving validation that I have some worth, some value. Now look at all of this validation that I'm getting, look at all this attention. This is making me feel really good about myself. This is now forming the basis of my self-esteem. And gradually what happens over time is that she leans more and more into that role. At first, it was just her natural genetic prettiness that was garnering all of this attention. But pretty soon she's experimenting with certain types of clothes and wearing makeup to try and accentuate her appearance. Then she discovers that certain types of behaviors make her more attractive to boys, and so she starts to develop a personality around that. It's almost as though the male gaze becomes the center of her world, and she starts to sort of orbit that because the sunlight, the energy source that comes from that is what's fueling her self-esteem. This is really problematic. It's not a good thing because men's attraction to women is not very sophisticated. In order for a man to find a woman attractive, at least on the surface, she doesn't really need to have a well-developed, a well-rounded personality. She needs to be young and hot. That's kind of it. This is a poison apple for women because while it might taste delicious in the short term, it's actually cursed because it saps her of any long-term motivation to develop herself. You've got men out there absolutely killing themselves to be successful, to achieve things, and they're just desperate to feel good about themselves, to impress other people, to prove to society that they are worth something, that they have something valuable to contribute. But for a pretty young girl, all of that positive validation is already handed to her on a silver platter. She already has all of that positive attention and validation without even having to work for it. And so is she going to spend her life striving and struggling to achieve things and to develop herself? No, why would she? She already has the reward. This is where that stereotype of the bitchy hot girl comes from. People noticed that there was a correlation between attractive women and them having unpleasant personalities. And of course it's more likely for a hot girl to be more bitchy because she never had to develop a likable personality in order to get, any positive validation. And sadly, this is why a lot of attractive women are kind of frozen in time, maturity-wise. Whatever age they were when they started getting this positive approval from men is the age that they sort of stopped growing because they no longer had any need to. Now, of course, this is a massive generalization. I'm just describing a general trend. Of course, there are numerous individual exceptions. For one thing, a lot of this comes down to parenting because as children and as teenagers, it's the approval of our parents that we actually care about the most. So if a girl has parents who are really heavily involved in her life and really invested in her becoming this high-achieving, well-rounded person with a great personality and a well-developed sense of intelligence and ethics, then the girl is going to pick up that that's what's important and she will develop in those areas. However, if she has absentee parents who don't really pay attention to her and don't really care about her that much, then she's not going to chase their approval so much. All of that desire for approval is going to get transferred onto her peers. So for the girl with really high quality parents, the attention that she's getting from boys is just one small slice of the pie that is her self-esteem. But for the girl with bad parents who are basically neglecting her, that approval she's getting from the boys, that is a huge slice of her pie. It's one of the only ways that she has of feeling good about herself, and so she doubles down on that strategy. Now, it's not as though there aren't other paths to self-esteem, but human beings are inherently lazy. Our brains are actually hardwired to seek pleasure and to avoid pain, and we are very prone to taking the path of least resistance. Sure, there are lots of guys who will struggle for years to become top athletes or to reach the very pinnacle of their profession, but for a lot of guys, that's just because that was their only option. Unless they were that higher achievers, they weren't going to get the validation and positive approval that they needed in order to feel good about themselves. As men, we don't get easy approval. That's not de facto gifted to us. We need to prove ourselves. We need to demonstrate our worth through continued work, through continued action. That's just what it is to be a man. We're not women. I bet that if some guys had the kind of validation and positive approval that pretty young girls get from an early age, it would sap a huge amount of their motivation to achieve. So for a young woman who is accentuating her appearance and beginning to act in a way that really just appeals to men and trying to make herself as attractive to men as possible, she might sense, deep down that she's walking down a bad path, but it's going to be really, really hard for her to resist. She's this awkward teenager. Her parents aren't paying much attention to her. She's unsure of herself, and there's this huge reservoir of positive attention and self-esteem energy that she can just tap into with very little effort. That is really, really hard for a teenage girl to resist that kind of temptation. Now, the reason that I'm talking about this and the reason why I think it's really important for men to be aware of this phenomena is because it serves as an important warning against judging the quality of a woman based purely off her appearance. Just because a girl is pretty does not mean that she's high quality, not at all. Everybody likes to date a beautiful woman. I'm not going to deny that. As men, we're always going to appreciate beauty. But remember, looks fade, and what's more, they fade pretty quickly. Good character, good personality, that lasts forever. You do not want to spend your entire life with somebody who never emotionally grew past the age of being a teenager, because her worldview is going to be so simple and superficial. What's more, as her appearance fades as she gets older and she loses that youthful appeal that garnered her so much positive attention in her youth, she's likely to become very bitter and angry at the world. So I'm here in this video to advocate for those women who might not be the most glamorous and stunningly beautiful. Maybe the kind of women that ordinarily you might look past because they're not going to be some trophy wife. It's not going to be a status symbol, who has the prettiest wife. He's not going to make all of your friends jealous when they first meet her. But in the privacy of your own home and inside your own relationship, she's a really good person. And she treats you nicely. She's kind, respectful, and honest, and she has character. Even if she's a bit more plain in appearance, it's the depth that matters so much more. Look for a woman who never took the easy option, who developed her self-esteem not based on appearance but on character and personality. If she is pretty, that's a nice bonus. I'm not going to deny you that, but I'll remind you that will fade and it's not as important as character. That's what's going to last forever, and that is what's going to make you happiest. How do you apply evolutionary psychology in a long-term relationship? What does it mean to be a high-quality man? And how do you approach dating if you're in your mid-40s and you still want children? All of these topics and many more are covered in exclusive videos available to my Patreon page. This includes my latest video, how to handle it if the girl you're in a relationship with becomes intensely political and starts to talk to you about lots of woke feminist politics. In this video, I talk about the tribalism that's infected our modern culture and the impact that this can have on personal relationships. I talk about the early warning signs you need to be vigilant in looking for, as well as the early steps of intervention that you can take to prevent this from becoming a serious problem. Lastly, I give practical tips on how to speak to your partner to resolve any of these concerns and work in such a way that the two of you are on the same team and this doesn't become a competitive relationship. If you're dating a girl who has different political opinions to you and she identifies as someone who's very woke and feminist, and you're worried about how that's going to impact your relationship, I highly recommend you check out this video. For every video that I post on YouTube, I post an additional bonus video on my Patreon page. That means that at the moment, you're only seeing half of the total content that I create. If you want access to the other half, then please go and sign up at my Patreon. It's just a $5 a month subscription, and you get instant access to a whole bunch of exclusive content. It's a wonderful way to support the channel, and I would love to see you over there.